The parable of the nobleman in Luke chapter 19, verses 11 following, is really the starting point for all sensible discussion of the kingdom of God. It is perfectly obvious there that the situation is such that the people, because Jesus is standing next to the capital of the kingdom, Jerusalem, they reasonably, and on the basis of everything they'd learned correctly from the Hebrew Bible, they naturally ask, is it now time for you to take charge of the kingdom and be king in Jerusalem? That's an excellent question. They couldn't have known otherwise until Jesus explained it to them. But he did explain it to them. But I don't think anybody's listening to what Jesus said there. He carefully said that it was not wrong to imagine the kingdom to be established in Jerusalem. That's self-evident. What is wrong is to think that the time had already come for that to happen. So he says he has to be the nobleman in the parable, in the illustration, who goes off to the Father in heaven to gain the right to rule and then to return. That is lucidly clear, absolutely without any kind of argument. Jesus is saying there, the kingdom belongs essentially to my return from heaven, having received the authority to rule as king. When he does come back, he then threatens his enemies with death. He never ever said, bring my enemies in front of me and slay them now. He never said that. Not for one moment. He died on the cross forgiving his enemies, not attempting to get even with them, much less execute judgment on them. But at the second coming, at the end of that parable in Luke chapter 19, verses 11 following, then the nobleman has returned from heaven, having gained the authority, which he now has, to rule, and he's waiting at the right hand of the Father until he subdues his enemies. This is Psalm 2, this is Hebrews chapter 13, and a massive text. The scheme is extremely easy until you start muddling the future with the present. Once you move the future into the present, you've lost the future. You have no future. The unclarity that seems to exist, and I don't know why this is so difficult, about the kingdom of God is quite frightening. Cannot people take a Bible, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, start there, and simply write down all the kingdom texts, and they would see in 10 minutes that the kingdom texts have primarily to do with the future, not primarily to do with the present. Yes, you can speak of the promise of the kingdom now, the ethics of the kingdom, all that, but you're ignoring, unless you see clearly, those 98% of those synoptic texts are kingdom future texts. The kingdom is that new world order that will prevail when Jesus returns. It cannot happen until he comes back. There's no pre-tribulation rapture, and not a 7-year liftoff. Yes, a 7-year period, that's classical futurism, fine. The 70th week of Daniel, clearly yet to be fulfilled. Yes, there's a final Antichrist, an abomination of desolation standing where he ought not to. All that's clear. But Jesus will come back once to raise the dead of all the generations of all the ages, and then establish his kingdom of God across the far reaches of the earth.
Just to go back to the parable, so what does it mean when it says the king goes away? Where does the king go?
He goes off on a journey, and that of course is quite clear. He goes off to heaven to be with the Father. That's where he's gone. To attain the right to kingship. He hadn't got it at that point. He hadn't qualified as king. He hadn't yet died for the sins of the world. He hadn't completed his ministry at this juncture in Luke 19.